Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and welcome to Phase 3 Mythic Raszageth. A good health percentage for this boss to be at as you begin this phase, something like 40% is what you're looking at. 42 is doable, 39 is great, anything like that, start of Raszageth, P3 is good. So, we start the fight. If you watched my first intermission video, you can see we all used Momentum Redistributor Boots, although I shouldn't have. I should have just Heroic Leapt to take no fall damage from landing there, to reduce the fall damage on the people that land on this platform. Raszageth shows up, and we hit the Bloodlust, we hit the potions, we hit all of our cooldowns, because Raszageth is now going to AFK for a solid 20 seconds. During this time, we are just attacking the boss. The boss came here at 40.5%, and we want to just eliminate as much of this boss's health as possible while no mechanics are happening. Meanwhile, from the edges of the room, a storm is going to start closing in on us. This storm will apply a stack of a dot as you stand in it that is permanent. So you really do not want to stand in that storm unless you absolutely have to, which only happens later in the phase. Meanwhile, on Mythic, there will also be tornadoes that come in from the edge of the room. Soaking one of those tornadoes will also give you a stack of that dot. But if you don't soak them, if one of them reaches Raszageth, it will heal her for 5% of her health, which is worse. So those do all need to get soaked. You want your tanky ranged, players like Warlocks, Moonkins. You want your Blood Decay, and to a lesser extent your other tank. But if you're playing with Blood Decay, they are really good at soaking those as well. And everybody should be kind of trying to get a few stacks of that debuff, and your tanky players should be trying to get a few more, and your Blood Decay should be just gobbling those things up, getting as many as they can. So, first mechanic that starts this phase off is a Tank Blast. The Tank Breath is an interesting mechanic. It targets the tank. If anybody else is in front of the boss, your whole raid's going to die. It targets the tank, and it deals them a bunch of damage. At the end of the breath, the tank is then going to explode. There you can see a little bit of damage. That damage amount is based on how much unmitigated damage the breath did. So, damage reductions and absorb shields are really strong against this because they reduce the damage that gets dealt to the raid. So what we do, AMS is really good, although AMS, as you use later in the phase, will start getting eaten up by the dot stacks that you have. Time dilation, pain suppression, spell reflection, decoration of flame, spell block, like every defensive cooldown you have. Decoration of flame, really good trinket for this because it's an absorb shield that actually refreshes during the middle of the breath as well. So you can get huge amounts of mitigation value out of that. But yeah, anything like that. I told both the priests, including the Holy Priest, to throw a Power Word Shield as well on whichever tank was being targeted, just to reduce that damage as much as possible because that will reduce the raid damage. So we start with a Tank Breath. Tank Breath lands on the DK. Then we get a Grip Charge. In P3, one player will get targeted. They will do fall off damage, so you want to be a little bit farther away from them. But they will then grip everybody to their position. You can actually survive being right on top of them, but you do take less damage the farther away you are. And then everybody gets gripped to their position. The first Grip Charge, all the person has to do is dodge the breath that comes out here. So you can see the boss is going to cast a Lightning Breath, and all that has to happen is the Grip Charge person needs to move so that they are not in that. If they are, the raid will wipe. Otherwise, it's fine. And you are immune to the breath while you are being gripped as well. So you don't have to worry about being gripped through the breath. Here you can see one of those tornadoes that are starting to come in from the edge of the room. That's a Mythic mechanic, as I said, to start getting those stacks of Storm Spite. Now, immediately after that Grip Charge, we go straight into the Fulminating charges, the same mechanic from P2, where 3 people get targeted by these circles, and we need to use stuff like Freedom, like movement effects to get out of them. Now, this time, you can see our Warlock here didn't get anything to get out of them. I make the decision here, because this is under boss, this is going to hit people. I don't think everybody's going to get out of this in time, so I choose as the tank to be the closest person so that it jumps to me instead of anybody else, because remember, it will only jump to the closest person. So this is not actually something we did very much, but this is kind of a split-second decision because of how bad it looked, that I would take it instead of somebody else. That's a good thing to do if you are a tank, I think. There are some guilds that also intentionally have their tanks or rogues or whatever doing this. We do that later in the phase as well. But make sure that they're not just jumping willy-nilly between the same 2 people over and over again is the big thing. So that charge lands on me, and now I'm going to have a little bit of an extra stack of a dot, which is actually kind of a pain because I'm going to get the Tank Breath here in a second. So Tank Breath is coming out on me. I'm using Time Dilation on myself. I'm entering Defensive Stance, which is one of only the Tank Breaths are the only reason I enter Defensive Stance in this phase. Other than that, I'm Battle Stance this whole fight, except for P1 where I'm D-Stance because we're stopping damage anyways. So that one was Spell Block, Shield Wall, Time Dilation, Decoration of Flame, Defensive Stance. And by doing that, I took no damage to my actual health bar, and you can see when I explode, the raid's health doesn't move there. I only take 2 tank breaths really in this phase and 1 at the very end of this fight, so I can afford to overcommit cooldowns to them just to reduce the raid damage, because you can see this is then immediately followed by another grip charge into a pushback. This is a really scary overlap here. Let's look at this again. We got a grip charge into a pushback. This grip charge goes off, and as the grip charge is going off, we have 2.5 seconds from when we land before this Tempest Wing comes out. And again, on Mythic, you AoE pulse around you here. So everybody is immediately going to spread in our pre-planned locations where we always go the same directions each time. And we're all spreading. You can see the whole raid, beautiful spread in different directions because we all need to make sure that we're not cleaving each other here. And then we're all using movement abilities to get back in, not AoE cleave too many times here. It's normal to cleave one person one time on that wing, but it's not normal to have everybody die to it, so that's why we need to do that. Okay, after that, the boss does another frontal breath that just needs to be dodged, and then the next thing is going to be another tank breath. You can see Snap there using AMS, reducing the damage, but not by... You can see actually did end up taking quite a bit of damage there, so let's look at this again. You can see damage coming out on Snap here, and because his health bar is actually going down, all that damage he took, even though he death struck it afterwards, explodes the raid there, and that is why Vors ends up dying here. Resets Grief Torches, though, it was worth, but that's something that we're trying to avoid there. Probably in retrospect, it would have been good to use something like a Pain Suppression to reduce that damage substantially. So, what happens next? Next, after that tank breath, is a grip charge. This is max melee range, is where this grip charge goes. So, not out into the storm, but max melee range of the boss is where the grip charge goes, because immediately after this, we get the Fulminatings. So you can see the Fulminatings land as everybody gets gripped here. So they're all going to be stacked up. Everybody is now getting out of this, but it's very hard for everybody to escape these circles in time. So what we do is we have our 2 rogues stay back and actually intentionally try and soak these charges. So you can see it worked sort of well here, although not perfectly. Unfortunately, one of the original people got their own charge back. If you do this perfectly, you're positioned charge, rogue, charge, and the charges will all jump onto the rogues. And then the people with charges can actually escape the smaller charges that the rogues are now holding. And the rogues, you can see they're low on health here, but they're going to hit Cloak of Shadows as this damage instance happens. And they're now going to be immune to the dot, which is really, really good. And they're going to be just fine. And that handles that set of fulminating charges really well. Now the boss kind of AFKs again for a while. Nothing really happens for a bit. Then here comes another frontal breath that you just want to dodge. Then we get another pull charge. Now this pull charge goes to the middle of the boss because it is again followed up by a AoE pushback. But look how little space we have now. The room is getting bad. The storm has closed in on us, and so we have very little. We're going to take some extra damage. People are going to go outside or cleave each other. Either way, they're going to need help. So we use our rally here. My rally hits that damage instance of the grip. And then this rally is going to persist through the Stormwing pushback. So everybody's spreading. It's a little bit more time lenient, but a little bit less space lenient than that earlier overlap of grip into wing. But you can see everybody's living okay. Now again, there's a tank breath on me. So this one is defensive stance, spell block, pain suppression are what I'm using against this one. And you can see barely managed to not take any damage there and not explode the raid to try and make sure. Spell block is really, really OP against that. Okay, so now we get another pushback. This one again, we have Time Spiral, so I'm able to leap it again. Time Spiral continues to be really big against those pushbacks so that everybody can have their movement abilities for them. And again, I'm just playing goalkeeper on these sparks, or on these tornadoes. I should have been on the other side of the boss here, actually, though. That was dumb of me, but luckily it didn't matter here because our other tank made a good call to make sure that we were soaking the other ones. But the other tank should have been here and I should have been on the other side, but I was dumb. So what happens there is every single person in the raid is stacking on so after this pushback, every single person in the raid goes and stacks on circle marker, which is where we have a gateway. So we have a gateway across the raid, and then we have a moon marker that is where the tank breath is going to be. What's going to happen here is fulminating charges come out, and every single person that's not affected by a fulminating charge gateways. The people that are affected by a fulminating charge can try and run out into the gunk to avoid getting spread onto each other too many times, but it's not really realistic. All 3 of them die. Doesn't matter. That's fine. Them dying there is kind of part of the plan. The main thing is we don't want it to keep spreading among the raid. So the whole rest of the raid has gatewayed out, and then those 3 people die, and we B-res them is kind of the idea of what we're doing against that one. And then, yeah, the tank breath went up towards Moon, and we're soaking tornadoes all around the rest of the boss. And after that, kind of not much happens again for a little while. The boss now starts to AFK, and all you have to do is kill the boss. There's one more tank breath at the very end here as we start reaching that 1410 mark here. I actually don't have very many cooldowns for this, so it's going to be defensive stance, and, hopefully the boss dies before we do, but you can see a lot of damage starting to come out here and explode for a little bit on the raid, although not as much as earlier. And that is the end of the fight. You don't have too much longer after that before you would all die, but you do have a little bit more time to kind of try and get over the finish line. You can see we have basically everybody alive. We have so many people alive at that point. Making it to that point in the fight with most people alive. Big deal is having your B-reses, right? Look at how many deaths we have here between 12 and 1330, especially these three that are all going to be are all kind of planned deaths to those charges. Obviously, if somebody can live, it's great, but we expect that there will be 3 deaths there. So having B-reses for all of them is really, really big. And that is something about phase one consistency, phase 1 intermission, all the other phases that we talked about. Being super clean on those phases is vital. That is Mythic Raszageth. I hope you've enjoyed this video series, this guide series. Let me know if it helped. My goal is to make something that would be useful for guilds that are going to progress this boss, but also interesting to people that have no intention of ever pulling it. So whichever of those categories you might fall into, let me know how this video series landed and if there are any changes you would like to see made for it in future. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.